Some mysteries refuse to sink. Even when the ocean tries to bury them, they rise again, silent, ghostly, and half-forgotten. The MV Joyita was one of them, a sturdy little vessel designed to survive anything the Pacific could throw at her. But one October morning in 1955, she vanished, along with 25 souls who should have been home long before the tide turned. 5 weeks later, she reappeared. No blood, no bodies, no answers. Just a drifting, broken ghost waiting for someone to listen. The Joyita was no beauty queen. Built in 1931, she was a 69-foot trading and fishing vessel. Steel frame, wooden hull, her white paint now chipped and tired. She had served as a patrol boat during the war, patched up too many times to count. But on October 3, 1955, she was loaded once again, this time with medical supplies, barrels of oil, food, and a few passengers bound for Tokola Islands, about 270 miles away from Apia, Samoa. Captain Thomas Dusty Miller stood on the dock that morning, chewing on a cigarette, eyes scanning the horizon. He'd been at sea long enough to read weather like scripture, and what he read that morning told him one thing: he'd rather stay ashore. "Engines'll hold?" asked his first mate Chuck Simpson, tapping the rusted hull. "They'll hold," Miller lied. At 5 a.m., Joyita slipped quietly out of Apia harbor, her engine coughing like an old man clearing his throat. She was expected to arrive in Tokola 2 days later. She never did. By October 6th, radio silence turned into concern. The U.S. Coast Guard was alerted. Search planes traced her route for nearly 2 weeks, nothing but empty ocean. No wreckage, no distress signal. For 25 days, Joyita remained a ghost on the Pacific. Then on November 10th, the freighter Tuvalu spotted something white drifting near Fiji. A ship, half submerged, listing badly to one side. When they came closer, they saw her name, Joyita. No one waved, no one called for help. When the boarding crew stepped on her deck, they found silence thick as fog. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath their boots. The engine room was flooded, about 4 feet deep. Her starboard engine had failed. The port engine's drive shaft was broken clean. Every clock on board had stopped at 10:25. The radio was tuned to 2182 kilohertz, the international distress frequency, but the wire was cut. Deliberately. There were coffee cups still on the table, half empty. A doctor's bag lay open, with surgical instruments neatly placed beside it, and a stack of cargo still intact, barrels, crates, even boxes of canned food. But not a single person. It was as if the crew had simply evaporated. The logbook was missing. So were 3 life rafts in the ship's dinghy. But the radio had a range of over 300 miles. Someone could have sent a distress call. Investigators from the U.S. Navy and Samoan authorities boarded her days later. They found more strange things. Bloodstains on a deck cushion, a doctor's scalpel missing, a canvas awning torn clean off. Captain Miller's pipe was found still on the control console, as if he just stepped out for a moment. Reporters smelled blood in the water. "Ghost ship found drifting near Fiji," screamed headlines in Honolulu and Auckland. Everyone had their theory. Mutiny? Some said Miller was hard on his crew. Pirates? The South Pacific still had its share of them in the 1950s. Engine failure and panic? Maybe they'd abandoned ship thinking she'd sink. But Joyita was so buoyant that she couldn't sink, even if she tried. Her hull was filled with cork and empty fuel drums. It was a floating coffin, incapable of drowning her dead. So where were they? Weeks later, a retired Navy engineer came forward with a story. He claimed he'd helped Miller repair the Joyita months earlier and warned him the fuel lines were rotted.
Miller, he said, patched them with tape and prayer. If a pipe burst, the fuel might have leaked into the bilge. A smell of diesel, panic, fire risk. Perhaps the crew thought she'd explode. Perhaps they took to the lifeboats. Perhaps the ocean took care of the rest. But if that was true, why the cut radio wire? Why the stopped clocks? And why, days before her voyage, did someone see Miller arguing with a stranger at the dock, an American man in a tan suit, who wasn't on the passenger list? None of the bodies were ever found, not even fragments of the lifeboats. In the following months, the South Pacific whispered its usual answers. The sea keeps its secrets. But sailors who crossed those waters said they sometimes saw her outline on foggy nights, drifting silently, as if searching for her crew. They called her the Mary Celeste of the Pacific. When I first opened the Joyita case file, the pages smelled of salt and mildew. Typed reports, faded photos, pencil notes in the margins, no signs of struggle, fuel tank intact, radio sabotage likely intentional. I stared at the photo of Captain Miller, weathered, proud, tired. The kind of man who'd go down with his ship, but he didn't. The sea did not claim him. It erased him. I spent weeks tracing the passenger list. One name stood out. Dr. Alfred Bates, a physician carrying supplies for a medical mission in Toccoa. Some records suggest he was under investigation for prescription smuggling in Hawaii. Another passenger, Reverend Bright, had argued with him days before departure. Could the Joyita have been carrying more than just medicine? Could there have been contraband, or worse, people desperate to disappear? If there was a fight, a mutiny, or an attempt to take over the ship, that might explain the missing logbook, the bloodstain, the cut radio wire. But 5 weeks adrift should have left debris. Nothing ever surfaced. To this day, no one knows what happened aboard the Joyita. She was salvaged, repaired, even returned to service, only to meet her final end years later, rusting in a Fijian harbor. Every so often, fishermen swear they find her nameplate washed up on distant shores, though the serial numbers never match. What remains is not a shipwreck, but an echo, a reminder that sometimes survival leaves no witnesses. Maybe the sea didn't take them. Maybe something else did. And maybe, just maybe, they're still out there, somewhere between Apia and Toccoa, sailing forever through the silence.